What's up everybody? Another PNW Best Life video here on a very important topic. We are talking about how to net a salmon, how to land a salmon on the river. Now some of these concepts apply to a boat as well, but really important you know what you're doing on the river. I'm about to go fishing with a bunch of friends on an annual river fishing trip for king and coho salmon. So here we go. As much as netters have a job to do and they gotta do the right thing, man, it can really help if the person on the rod who's fighting the fish knows what they're doing and really makes it easy on the netter, right? There's a lot that can go wrong when you're trying to get that fish on the bank, and right in that moment you've seen how big this fish is, maybe you've seen it doesn't have the extra fin, you're like, oh, it's a hatchery, let's get this fish on the bank, let's go. Somebody screws it up and you lose it right there, and everybody's upset. You're like, ah, why didn't you net my fish? Or you know, oh man, you gotta control the fish. You know, like everybody gets, oh, they're just all upset. And then you go back and you're talking about the day. You're like, oh, so and so screwed up my, you know, they lost my fish, blah blah blah. And it's fun, right? It's fun as friends. Like we do it as friends. We give each other a hard time about netting salmon, and that's cool and everything. But you know what would be really cool is if we didn't lose any fish getting into the net. Didn't lose any fish right there at the bank. So this video is gonna be all about what you need to know as a netter or as the person fighting the fish to make sure we put more fish on the banks. Let's talk about 3 phases of fighting a salmon, all right? It's phase number 1. By the way, this applies to steelhead just as much, really any river fish. Phase number 1, you hook that fish and it goes on some, you know, it's a king salmon, it's gonna go on some blistering runs, line peeling out, real singing, you know, I mean, like heart pounding stuff, like pure adrenaline, pure electricity. It's so awesome. It's why we get hooked on these on this pursuit, right? We love fighting these big fish, and it's gonna run. Sometimes some king salmon, they run right at you. They run right at your position. You're reeling, you're trying to catch up. And if you're thinking that you can net that fish in that first minute, you're crazy. You're gonna lose that fish probably at least half the time, probably more. You know that fish is not ready. So the best thing that fish can do is it can run back downstream, tire itself out, right? Big king salmon, you know, 20 pounds plus, it's gonna have a few runs in it, right? It's gonna take you downstream potentially. You're gonna have to follow that fish. And this is called phase 1. Like the fish is super feisty, a lot of energy, a lot of power. That's why we love these fish. Phase 2, you can tell it's gotten a little tired out. It may even come to the bank and you may think it's a nettable fish, right? But it still has enough energy to pull off maybe a 20-yard run, maybe a 10-yard run, maybe a just outside of net length kind of run, right? It's got a little bit of energy left. And you can net a fish in phase 2, and oftentimes this is where things go wrong. A lot of times in phase 1 you don't even have an opportunity to net. In phase 2 you have an opportunity to net, but the fish has still got energy, and this is where things go wrong. We're going to talk about that. If you fight a fish to phase 3, just about anybody can net that fish. So like the fish is belly up, it's tired, it's done, like it's cooked. Just about anybody can net that fish, right? Or you might even have a chance to drag it up on the bank, or you might be able to tail it. That's a technique too. I'm going to talk about in this video. All right, so those are the 3 phases. Now let's talk about the job of the netter and of the person on the rod with the fish. Here we go. Here's some techniques, starting with the netter. Okay, if you're trying to net your friend's fish, there's really just 2 things you need to keep in mind, besides what we talked about earlier with like which phase is it. Don't try to net in phase 1 when the fish is real feisty. At least wait for phase 2, and potentially even phase 3, although sometimes those 2 things can be hard to tell. So these 2 principles though will have you in good shape if you follow them as the netter. Number 1, stay downstream of the fish. If you stay downstream of the fish, when it decides it wants to run, it wakes up and decides it's got another run in it, it may run right into your net, okay? Number 2, you want to always net from the head. Don't try to net it from the back. Like you want to net it from the head. right? So as it's kind of turning towards the angler fighting the fish, as it's turning, towards the bank, as they're controlling it, which we'll talk about here in a minute, you can net that fish directly from the head and from the downstream position. All right, netting can be incredibly easy, incredibly simple if you follow those two rules, and you get a little help from the person on the fish. All right, we got to talk about the person fighting the fish, because I think a lot of times you more experienced anglers, you find yourself in a position of maybe you hook a fish, maybe you hand it off to your friend, or maybe your friend hooks a fish and you want to net their first fish and help them get on it, right? And it can be a little frustrating because there's some things that you can do as the person with the fish that will really help that netting job go well. All right, now, and really, probably the most important thing. Well, there's a couple things. Number one, you want to keep the head underwater until that fish is ready. If you are yanking on it, right, pulling that fish up, that fish's head comes out of the water before you're ready to net it. And it really starts thrashing around. Maybe it even jumps, goes aerial. Cool to see, but oftentimes that's where you lose the fish. You keep the head in the water, keep side pressure, side bend on it, which you can see here. And then this is really important. This is super, super crucial. As you're getting ready to net that fish, if you're the person holding the rod, is control the fish in deep enough water to net it. And what I mean by that is apply a little bit of thumb pressure, not too much, but a little bit of thumb pressure, right? That if that fish decides it wants to kind of turn again, it has a much harder time doing it. If it wants to run and it's a big fish, you gotta lay off the thumb pressure, because otherwise you might break that fish off. But you can help get that fish in the net big time if you put a little bit of thumb pressure and you keep it from turning, and you just guide that fish right to the net, right to that downstream position, head first, where your netter's at. You can be a big part of a successful net job. So many times the person fighting the fish doesn't do this, and then they get really upset at the person who wasn't able to net the fish, even though they made it really, really hard on them. So do your part, do a good job, and you'll find your trophy salmon in your friend's net much more often. You have a job to do, you have a role to play. Let's look at some footage here of a few examples of both. All right, so approaching it from the downstream position, fish is in phase 2. Oh, all right, what happened? All right, that fish could have been netted right there. Yeah, the netter could have done a better net stab, could have done a better job. But if the angler had put the thumb on the spool, fish would be in the net right there, right? Control the fish. What did the fish do? Had enough strength to make another about 10-foot run, and now it's tired again. Now we're trying to walk it downstream, right? We're downstream again, and we're trying to get this fish in the net. But now as a netter, I'm thinking, man, I gotta be super cautious with this, because this fish is gonna run. This angler who's fighting this fish isn't gonna control it. So I gotta be perfect, or I'm gonna end up losing this fish. I'm gonna knock this fish off. So this can be a real challenge. Now, good news with this story here is it ends well, but it could have been a lot easier, a lot simpler. And now the fish is a little bit closer, maybe to phase 3, getting a little tired. But even right there, it's like, man, you just thumb the spool for a second right there. That fish is in the net, right? Just a split second. You control that fish. Now here we go. We're gonna give it another try. Here we go. Now we got it. All right, fish is in the net. That's a nice fish. It's not a super big fish though. It's not like you have even more problems with a fish twice that size, and there's plenty of fish in here twice that size. All right, we're fighting this fish. We're getting ready to bring it in. Watch what I'm doing. I'm fighting it. Watch what I'm doing. Watch what I'm doing with my thumb. Keep an eye on the reel. Keep an eye on what I'm doing with my thumb as we get closer. We're in phase 2, right? We have a chance to net this fish. It's an even much bigger fish than the one on the previous clip. And just watch what I'm doing with my thumb. See, my thumb's going on the spool. I'm now leading the fish to the shore. This fish is strong enough to pull drag anytime it wants. It's a nice upper teens king salmon. Look at how easy that is. How easy that is. It's head first netting job. from an upstream position, but it's super easy when you just hold the fish there with your thumb, right? Now, if the fish was gonna make another run, I'd have to back off the thumb pressure. But this is just an example of how you, as the person fighting the fish, can make it super easy to get it done. Here's a casting reel, right? What I'm talking about is as that fish is getting close, right, and it's still got a little bit of energy left, I'm gonna put my thumb right on the spool and gently thumb it, right? What this means is the fish can't pull line. Even if it could pull line out of a normal drag setting, even, you know, with a little bit of energy left, it can't really do that here, all right? Now, there's a risk. If that fish has got more energy than I think it has, it could run, and if I got my thumb on the spool and it's a big fish, it could break me off. So there is some risk involved here, right? But it's about you reading the fish, knowing it's time, knowing you can control it a little bit. If you don't thumb the spool, right, and your netter goes in thinking, oh, I got this fish, we're in phase 3, I got this fish.
There, Kyle, it's right there. I can't get it. Whoa, Kyle, you're tangled in the net.
And it makes a run. Maybe it runs at the angler's feet, right? Or maybe it runs at the netter's feet. Maybe it runs like it can jack you up and get that line tangled. You can get the net tangled. Things can go bad really fast, right? If you as the angler just thumb the spool, let's look at it on a spinning reel. Okay, on a spinning reel, you can do the same thing. You put your thumb, see right here. Put your thumb right here, right there. Okay. The spool can still spin. You could still take your thumb pressure off. If you put it right there, you can control that fish in that last second. And when it tries to turn around and run back into the current, it can't do it because you got your thumb there, and as long as it's not still strong enough to break you off, you can do it. And I would say that more often than not, you're going to be way more proficient at getting these fish on the bank if you, with the rod in your hand, will thumb the spool and lead that fish right to the net. Right? Make it easy on the netter. Put that fish in the net. You got 2 examples I just showed you. One where it looks super risky and sketchy to try to net it, and one where it went really smoothly. So difference is thumbing the spool, controlling the fish right at that crucial moment. So, okay, one other topic I got to talk about. We got to talk about banking and tailing a fish. All right, last thing to talk about is really not netting it at all. Like, you just want to tail it or drag it up on the bank. That's another technique you can do. And as a matter of fact, when I'm fishing solo, I don't want to take a big net, hike a net into my fishing spot. And a lot of times I don't want to trust random Joe Bob angler down at the creek that they know how to net my fish properly. I'm going to prefer, when I have an appropriate bank, to try to land my fish either by dragging it on the beach if it's a small enough fish, or if it's a larger fish, I'm going to try to tail it and help it get up there. If you try to drag a large fish onto the beach or through some rocks or some areas, you're going to break that fish off and you're going to be really unhappy. Been there, done it. Where a rod's length worth of line out, where you can bend down and with your other hand, you can grab the wrist of the tail. And together, you can put the fish on the bank, right? So, and there's a trick to it. There's a helpful prop or helpful tool that'll help you be more successful with it. We'll talk about. All right, if you're gonna tail a fish, first of all, a lot of times, whether it's cold out, my hands get kind of numb when they're cold. I got these buffalo gold gloves. Wool gloves work the same. Keeps your fingertips available, right? Feel line, do things with. Keeps your hands warm. Well, these have an incredible advantage when you're tailing a fish. If you don't have these on, right, and it's just your hands or some nitrile gloves because you're using eggs, that wrist of the tail on a big fish is gonna be so slippery. It's gonna be so hard to control it that way. If you're fishing with gloves on, you grab that tail, it's gonna stick. You're gonna have grip on that fish, and you're gonna be able to scoop it up. When it comes to tailing or banking your fish in places where they're mark selected, where you can only retain a hatchery fish, you better be really sure that fish doesn't have an extra fin before you tail it, throw it up on the beach. Yep, it's a hatchery. I see people do that sometimes. They drag that sucker onto the beach, and then they're like, oh, it's got an extra fin, I guess it's going back. That fish might not make it to spawn. Like, you've just killed that fish, right? And you've illegally killed it. You've poached it because it was a wild fish in a hatchery-only retention area. So if you're gonna do that, make sure you've controlled the fish, shallow enough water, verify there's no fin. You could tail it in shallow water. I have tailed king salmon in 3 feet of water by tiring it out, right? It was on a steep bank, I had to get in the water, and I was able to grab the rest of the tail, control it, look at the adipose, oh, no adipose, bam, throw it on the bank. It's possible, you can do it. So here's some tips, hopefully help you have less fights around the campfire, dinner table at night, for, you know, blaming people for netting, you know, for netting your fish, or losing your fish, or breaking it off, and so on and so forth. Those are a lot of fun, make for good stories, but you know what else is fun is landing that trophy king salmon and putting it on the bank, getting a nice photo with it, turning it into sashimi, and eating that sucker up. So yeah, let's do more of that. Good luck out there, and here's to more fish on the banks, and less angry anglers out there due to lost fish, due to poor netting. So, all right, take care. Tight lines.